I'm Jane Crimmins, Lewisboro Town Board member, and I'm joined today by Mika Mclane Bose, who's a local business owner. She owns Westchester Creative Arts Therapy right here in historic Cross River in the Yellow Monkey Village in Lewisboro, New York. Full disclosure, I first got to know Mika when our girls went to preschool together right up the road at St. John's, and she has this undeniable magnetism and spirit for adventure that just draws you right in and I'm sure informs her practice. But before we get to all that, Mika, tell us why you chose Lewisboro for your growing family and your now growing business.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks for all those nice words,
Yeah.
too. I recently started my private practice here in Lewisboro. I lived in the city for many years, and when my husband and myself were starting to think about having a family and thinking about where we wanted to live, we found ourselves kind of leaving the city a lot on weekends and wanting to explore and be more connected to nature. So we spent about a year driving around on weekends looking at different towns, and when we found Lewisboro, we just felt such a connection, the fact that it's so beautiful, and the community seemed really close-knit and really nice, and now we've been here for about 6 years, and we can't imagine being anywhere else.
Wow, 6 years.
Yeah.
That went by fast,
I know,
right?
it did go by really fast.
I think a lot of people who live in Lewisboro can really connect to what you just said and feel the same way, especially about the natural environment, which I'm sure also informs your practice. So let's get more to what that is.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain what art therapy is?
Sure.
We'll start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So art therapy is essentially a form of psychotherapy that uses art as a tool for expression in therapy. So it basically encourages people to express and understand their emotions through the creative and artistic process.
Mm-hmm. And how is that different from a traditional talk therapy?
So, anytime somebody's experienced a traumatic or stressful event in their life, sometimes it can be hard to articulate or talk about that on a verbal way.
Mm-hmm.
And so art therapy allows you to express yourself on a more sensory level and kind of get in touch with different aspects of yourself that you might not be able to connect to with just talking. So when you're creating and you're making art within the therapeutic relationship and with a therapist, it allows you to have a conversation and talk without words. You're able to kind of give a visual representation of what's going on inside yourself, and then you have that in front of you and you're able to kind of gain perspective and be able to look at this that you've created and created something outside of yourself. And that kind of allows you to connect with those other pieces that might not be as easily connected to when you're talking.
So once you get into the flow of the art making with an experienced professional like yourself, you can reveal things about yourself, but you don't have to use the words. You might not even know that was kind of coming out, and it helps you put words to it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah, it gives you a visual piece of what's going on inside your body and within yourself. And sometimes that can really help you to have a better understanding and connect to those pieces that you otherwise might not have known were there, but what might not have been able to connect to.
It's amazing. So do you have to be an artist to do this?
No, you don't. You could have never picked up a paintbrush. You could have never really experienced art making. It's really about wanting to create and having the desire to do something artistic. So when people come in, it's really you just need to want to do or make something. And it's also not about creating something that's good or that somebody would view as beautiful. It's really about the process of creating and what comes up for you when you're actually making the art and then talking during the art making process.
So what do people tend to do with their work once they're done with it? Do you work from session to session with it, or?
Yeah, good question. So every session's different. We have some people who work on things for multiple sessions and really want to process something more in depth. And then you can have, a child who comes in and just really needs to get all that aggression out and do a bunch of scribbling and a bunch of physical motions in order to kind of have that emotional release. And then you also have people who finish their art and they might not want to keep it. And, they might not want to have it anymore. And that's totally okay. You don't always have to like your final product and your piece.
Right.
And that's something interesting to explore too.
Because I want to differentiate for people between art therapy and art class. Can you explain a little bit about the credentials you need to become an art therapist, and then talk a little bit about some of the environments you've worked in that have really stuck with you or mean a lot to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to hold a master's degree in art therapy in order to practice and be an art therapist. And you also need to be licensed and registered through the American Art Therapy Association. And then after graduate school, similar to a lot of other therapies, there's postgraduate work and supervision that needs to happen in order for you to maintain and also keep the certifications. Before starting my private practice here in Lewisboro, I worked for 12 years in the city, primarily in a pediatric hospital and in a school system in the Bronx. When I was working in the hospital, I had a lot of experience in just working with medical illnesses and children who are facing chronic or life-threatening illnesses, and then also with the families, of course, because if you're working with kids, you're working very closely with the families and with the parents.
Always.
And so that really has kind of shaped my practice, and that's a part that I felt really connected to. And so when I started my private practice, that's kind of been the focus of my practice, has been loss. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily bereavement, but also the greater concept of what loss is. So loss of sense of self. Yeah, loss of sense of self, loss of identity, divorce. There's so many different aspects that loss kind of shapes and affects our lives. And so that's where my focus has primarily become with my private practice.
Well, speaking of that, I know that you just started a new art circle for soon-to-be empty nesters, talking about loss, because you've been focused a lot on motherhood. Can you tell us a little bit about the circles you're running now so that people have an opportunity to know about them and come check it out?
So a few times a month, I facilitate circles, groups for women that really just focus on self-care and identity after motherhood. As mothers, so much of our identity is being the mom and providing for our families.
Wrapped up in that role.
Yeah, it really is all consuming. And even if you're, working or you're in the home, so many of the issues affect people similarly, and people have the same struggles. And so I wanted to allow an opportunity for women to come together in a group environment and be able to support each other and be able to connect and just kind of hold space for wherever they are in their journey through motherhood. So kind of maintaining an opportunity to express anything that comes up at any stage of motherhood. And so recently started a group for empty nesters as well, or soon to be empty nesters.
Which filled up fast.
Yeah.
All the monthly art circles fill up really fast. Yeah. They're really popular.
I think it's a really nice opportunity also for people to come and kind of see a little bit more about what it is and what art therapy is.
Get a taste, maybe for the more reluctant client. So what would you say to somebody who is interested in what you're saying, but the stigma therapy has kind of gotten to them and, they feel opposed to it? What would you say? Come check it out?
Yeah.
How could they get to know more about it? Or
therapy, I think, is beneficial for everyone. Yeah. And the opportunity to be able to express yourself to somebody who doesn't have the same connection that a family member or a friend would, and can come as an unbiased source to come and support you and through the process of what you're going through, I think is really important. And therapy can be, you can be a little nervous. You don't know what it is. You don't know what's going to happen. And I would say that if somebody hasn't been to therapy before, hasn't tried art therapy, that it is a really non-threatening, very supportive opportunity for you to kind of just get a little bit more in touch with what's going on within yourself, because we all experience stressful events, and we all experience we all struggle at different points in our lives, and it's really important to not just suppress those emotions and those feelings, and to have an opportunity to release and process what's happening and what's going on, because the whole idea is for us to have a better quality of life.
So how do you get the word out about your services? How can people know more about you?
So I advertise on social media quite a bit in terms of the circles, as I mentioned before, are a great opportunity for people to come and see the space and get to meet me and get to know a little bit about what art therapy is and what it feels like and what it looks like. And then I also take insurance, so that's helpful for getting clients as well. And then it's also really word of mouth. If somebody has had a good experience and then they talk to a friend, it's kind of a nice way to be able to find a therapist when you have somebody who has already had an experience with me. So those are the different ways that people typically find me in my practice.
Who comes to art therapy? Who is art therapy for?
So art therapy, a common misconception is it's just for children,
Right.
which it works wonderfully with children, and it's a great opportunity to work with children in a playful, really non-threatening way,
Right.
because art is play for them, and that's how they create and express themselves.
But it's so much more,
It's
right?
so much more. So there's a lot of work with art therapy, whether it be with mental health, a lot of work with people who are experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's, people with PTSD. There's been a lot of work with art therapy and veterans. There's also been a lot of work with art therapy for people experiencing past trauma or loss, which is primarily what I specialize in and working with, is that medical piece, and working with people who have experienced some sort of type of loss and how to appropriately go about explaining what that looks like to a child, and also for parents what it looks like for somebody, how can they developmentally appropriately explain to their child what's going on, and ways that they can kind of process that. But art therapy is for everyone, and a lot of different people experience art therapy as really beneficial and really helpful, and a way to connect to themselves that they didn't really understand was possible.
What does a typical session look like?
Absolutely. So a typical session is a very interactive experience, because you are creating and making art. It's not just a therapist sitting while you talk and kind of share different things that are going on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who comes in to see me, they have the opportunity to work with a variety of different mediums. So
are you also making art alongside them, or are you respecting their process, or it just depends on the client?
it just depends. Sometimes I'll be making something little on the side, but typically it's the person is making the art and creating, and then we're talking or not talking as they're making and creating the art.
And then do you do just one-on-one, or do you do family or group?
Yes. So I do one-on-one primarily, but then anytime that I work with a child, there is a lot of family work that's also involved. Mm-hmm. So I do family sessions as well as individual sessions in the space here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. And when we're making and creating the art, there's a lot of different materials to choose from in the space. So in terms of a session, if somebody wants to come in and they have something really specific that they want to work with, mm-hmm. like clay, or they want to paint or mm-hmm. do collage, mm-hmm. the idea is that anything that they would like to create and mm-hmm. make, they mm-hmm. have the opportunity to choose from those materials in the space, and that there's just a wide range of mediums to use and choose from and explore and manipulate.
So is that first session a lot of explaining all of that and then letting them choose? People don't typically come in and know their first session, I want to work with clay. Do they? Or
sometimes.
Wow.
Sometimes people come in and they just know immediately what they want. And some people need a little more guidance, mm-hmm. and they want something that is more specific and like a specific directive or something specific to do, because mm-hmm. they don't want to necessarily have to choose, and that's okay too. It's kind of just more meeting people where they're at and then going from there.
So thank you so much for talking with us today, and you can tell people your website, or and do you take insurance? That's a
Right. Yeah. Yes. I do take insurance. I'm in network for Cigna Insurance.
Hooray.
And people have had a lot of success with out-of-network coverage as well.
Great.
So that's really helpful for people when they're trying to think of how to...
Finances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then people find me typically through my website, which is WestchesterCreativeArtsTherapy.com, or just Google Westchester Art Therapy, and I come up here right in Cross River. And then word of mouth too, right? Mm-hmm. It's always nice to hear when somebody's had a good experience or had a connection, or that's always kind of helpful when starting to navigate the process of finding a therapist.
Thank you for joining us today on our local television channel, LCTV, our visit with Mika Mclane Bose here at Westchester Creative Arts Therapy. I learned a lot about art therapy and the different people that you can treat, and the benefits for everybody, specifically that you can treat people kind of the whole age range, and that your specialty is really with those serious medical diagnoses. And I hope that this will help people to maybe connect with you and find some healing through your process. So thank you so much for having us, Mika. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jane.
Until next time, thanks for joining. This is Jane Crimmins, member of the Lewisboro Town Board, and thanks for watching LCTV Channel 20.
watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.